Before we begin this video, I would like to invite you to our site casinoglow.com and claim amazing bonuses waiting just for you, from no deposit bonuses to free cash and much more. So check them out and enjoy them. If you enjoy our video, please like it and subscribe to support our channel. Now, let's begin. 5-card draw, tips, tricks, and strategy. 5-card draw is a classic poker game that most people learn to play as kids. It's a fun game which is easy to learn, and for beginners, this game is the best place to start learning about poker. 5-card draw uses normal poker hand rankings, and betting rounds and structure are more or less the same as other poker games like Texas Hold'em and Omaha. Rules of the game. Each hand starts with a specific player being designated as a dealer. This is indicated by a dealer button that is placed in front of the relevant player. The player to the immediate left of the dealer is the small blind, and the next player to the left is the big blind. At the completion of each hand, the dealer button and blinds move one position to the left. The two blinds must make a forced bet, but the size of this bet depends on the table limits. Most 5-card draw games are fixed limit. For example, if you're playing a $2, $4 fixed limit game, the small blind is $1 and the big blind is $2. Once the blind bets have been made, the dealer passes out cards to the players. Starting with the player in the small blind position, each player receives 5 cards face down, one at a time in a clockwise order. When every player has 5 cards, the first round of betting begins. The player to the left of the big blind acts first, and they have 3 options at this stage: fold, call, or raise. Play continues with the next player to the left. Each player has the same 3 options. Once all players have either called the previous high raise or folded, the betting round ends. Now comes the draw phase. In this phase, each player can select any number of cards he wishes to discard. These cards are then replaced by the dealer, and if a player chooses not to discard any of his cards, then he has what is called a bad hand. After all the new cards are dealt, there is another round of betting in the same order as the first round. This time, the first player remaining in the hand to the left of the dealer starts the action. They now can either check or bet. Subsequent players can only check if no bet has been made. Once a bet has been made, they must call that bet or make a raise if they wish to stay in the hand. Another option is to fold. When every player has acted, the betting is completed for the hand. If more than one player remains after the second betting round, there is a showdown. The player with the best 5-card poker hand wins the pot. If a player raises and gets no callers, he wins the pot by default. Betting limits. The betting limits are determined by the table limits. In a $2, $4 fixed limit game, the limits of betting and raising each round are $2 and $4. The first betting round has $2 increments, and the second round has $4 increments. 5-card draw can be played as a fixed limit game, pot limit game, and no limit game. In a no limit game, you can bet all your chips at once. In a pot limit game, your bet is determined by how much money is in the pot. In a fixed limit game, the limits determine how much you can lose in any one hand. For inexperienced players and beginners, it's best to choose a fixed limit game and not risking losing all your money at once in a no limit game. Game strategy. 5-card draw may not be as popular as Hold'em or even Omaha, but most players who choose to play this game happen to be less skilled and play with little to no strategy. That in turn increases your odds of becoming a winning player at the game. If you start the game with a strong hand before the draw, chances are you'll win the pot. The favorite in the hand before the second round generally remains the favorite after the second round. Since there's only one draw, the chance of your opponent improving their hand is low. That's why variance is so low. Like other poker games that involve draws, your chances of improving on the draw are directly related to the strength of your starting hand. The worse your starting hand is, the harder it is to improve to a winning hand. Weak players try to get lucky by taking a draw and trying to improve their hand. Sometimes this works, but most of the times it doesn't. It's best to narrow your starting hand range. You should also take advantage of weak players looking for the miracle draw that rarely comes. To win at 5-card draw, choose strong starting hands which have the best odds over your opponent's hands. You won't win every pot, and you sometimes lose to a worse starting hand, but in the long run, This discipline and strategy will work in your favor, and you will be a profitable player with cash in your pockets. Your position is another important factor to consider. Late position means you'll act last, and meanwhile, you'll be able to gather information about your opponents according to how they play their hand. Your starting hand should be stronger if you're in early position, and the range of your hand can be wider in late position. Hands play suggestion according to position. Here are the hands you should play according to your position. Bear in mind that this is only our suggestion, and you're free to play however you wish. First position, pair of aces or better. Early position, pair of kings or better. Middle position, pair of queens or better. Button, pair of tens or better, or a pair of nines, provided you have two cards higher than the 9 in your hand or an ace. Small blind, limp in with ace-queen to a pair of sixes. This is a rare exception to the never limp rule. You should open by raising with anything better, especially if all your opponents fold. If the big blind raises, call and draw free cards. Although your odds aren't great, you need to defend your blind sometimes. When in doubt, fold. Big blind, if two or more opponents limp in, raise with a pair of kings or better. With two or three players in after a raise, call with a pair of tens or better. Re-raise with a pair of jacks or better. When in doubt, fold. You'll be folding most hands before the first draw, but that is the strategy that will keep you profitable. Patience is the key in every form of poker. Good players play fewer hands than weak players. This is consistent at most limits until you reach the highest limits. The more players at the table and the hand, the narrower your hand's range should be. If there are only few players at the table, then you can extend your range, as there are fewer hands to beat and a lower chance of good hands popping up against your hand. Selecting a table. It's crucial that you select the right table for you, according to your skills and bankroll. Also, it's best to play against weaker players so your chances of winning increase. Here are a few things to consider when choosing a table. First, the limits that you play at can dictate the strength of the players. Usually, the higher the limits, the better the players. The lower the limits, the weaker the players. Even if you have the bankroll to play high limits, it's still best to play lower limit tables until you improve your game. If you're playing online, make notes on other players and opponents to keep track of how they play. When it's time to choose a table, you can use your notes and select the right table for you. Reading the opponents. In 5-card draw, there are no community cards as opposed to Hold'em, Omaha, and other poker games. That is why all the information you get from your opponents is from tells, hand history, betting patterns, and how many cards they discard on the draw. This allows you to narrow your opponent down to a range of possible hands. You then weigh the odds against your own hand to determine if you can win the pot. You should follow the play and study each opponent in every hand, even if you aren't currently in the pot. Take notes of how often each player voluntarily enters the pot, their betting patterns, and the number of cards they discard in the draw. Then, correlate this information to actual exposed hands at the showdown. Build a profile for each player. Doing this enables you to determine a range of possible hands that you're up against. This then helps you to make an informed decision about folding, calling, betting, or raising. Watch how many cards an opponent chooses to discard on the draw. If they discard 2 or more cards, then they probably have a weak hand. If they discard only one card, they might be drawing to a flush or straight, which has low odds of hitting, or they have made a hand and are looking to make it even stronger. If they stand pat, which means not discarding any cards at all, then they either have a strong hand or they're trying to bluff. If you're in a hand where an opponent stands pat and then checks to you, proceed with caution. They might be trying to slow play a monster hand, but this can also be played as a bluff. In this situation, it might be worth checking unless you also have a monster hand. If an opponent has drawn 2 or more cards and then proceeds to bet aggressively, chances are they have missed the hand, because you already know that the chances of improving a hand are low. However, there is a 10% to 20% chance they may have hit the hand. Study the betting patterns of your opponents. It's one of the best ways you'll get information where you are in the hand. Players have certain patterns they follow, and by learning their betting patterns related to how many cards they draw and how many pots they voluntarily enter, you learn a lot. Planning your hand. Come ready to the game and always have a plan for each hand. This plan should be in line with your overall strategy. In each hand, you must use tactics that are derived from your strategy and implement this by playing the hand in a certain way. If you have a solid strategy and subsequent tactics and plans, then you'll end up in profit. In 5-card draw, as in other poker games, it's important to play according to your position. Early position puts you at disadvantage because you have no information on what other players will do before you act, and your hand range is narrow. Being in late position allows you to get information from the other players in the hand before it's your time to act. Therefore, when in early position, enter pots only with strong hands. If you're in late position, you can widen your starting hand range. Acting less can also determine how many cards you discard on the draw. If all the opponents are discarding 2 or more cards, you can stand pat with a weaker hand and try to bluff your way to winning the pot. In late position, you also have pot control, meaning you can determine how large the pot is. You can decide to check a pot through, raise, or call. The final decision, both pre-draw and post-draw, is with you. You're controlling the hand. This also allows you to manipulate the play to suit whatever hand you're holding. Voluntarily entering pots is another thing to consider. If a player enters a lot of pots voluntarily, then they're generally a weaker player with a wide range. This means they will often not have a strong hand. If a player is voluntarily entering pots a few times, then they're probably a stronger player with a stricter starting range. It will be hard to win a hand against them. Focus your play on opponents with a high percentage of entering pots voluntarily in conjunction with your own hand range and position. Position and starting hands are the keys to make players profitable. By making the right decisions throughout the hand, you can increase profitability. Once you've entered the hand, determine what you'll do in any situation. This is much easier to do in 5-card draw, as there are only 2 betting rounds and 1 draw. Therefore, you need to decide what you'll do if an opponent checks, bets, or raises. Also, change your plan from time to time so your opponents won't be able to read you. Last but not least, always review your hands and work out what you did well and what errors you made. This is even easier playing online, as you'll be able to review a complete hand history after each session. Tails. As mentioned earlier, there are no community cards in 5-card draw, so the only information you and your opponents have about each other is what you and they see during the game. This can be through betting patterns, how many cards each player discards and draws, and verbal and nonverbal actions. Don't worry too much about giving away information in respect to betting and drawing. You can change your play up a little bit depending on your opponent and what hand you have, but you still need to take the necessary actions to be more profitable. If you play on a table with weak players, they're far more concerned with their own hand and actions. They won't give any thought to what you're doing. Many players can't control their body language or voice at the table. If you can control yours, you can study opponents to your advantage. Study the players and see how they act if they missed or hit their cards. See if they give away any tails. You can act yourself to deceive your opponents, but do it carefully and wisely. When playing online, you can change your action speed in order to confuse your opponents. Often, players will act quicker and slower depending on their hand strength, so you should either change it up or always take the same amount of time to act. Common mistakes. Here are some common mistakes to avoid when playing 5-card draw. Number 1. Never play pairs smaller than jacks out of position. Number 2. Limping means just calling to enter a pot. If you stick to the starting hand suggested earlier in this video, then you should always fold or raise, never just call. Number 3. Don't invest too much when drawing to a straight or flush, as the chances of hitting them are low. Number 4. Don't keep a kicker when holding a pair. Instead, discard all 3 cards to give you the best possible chance of making 3 of a kind. Number 5. If you know your beat, swallow your pride, control your ego, and throw the hand away. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video, and if so, please like it and subscribe. Also, reminding you to visit our site to claim great bonuses and take advantage of our promotions waiting just for you. Enjoy, have an amazing day.